when you look at what Jonathan Gannon wants to do structurally, at least what we think he wants to do, is you go back to the first half of last year. He wanted to play his safeties deeper. He wants to play his linebackers a little bit back. And to do that, to play sort of like a Tampa 2 or a cover 2, you need to have a mammoth run-stuffing defensive tackle. And it's not like the Eagles went out there and only got Tony Siragusa, right? Somebody who can only, or Gilbert Brown. I know I've seen that comparison. I don't think that's fair because Jordan Davis is a unicorn. He's actually, to me, a 3 technique like Fletcher Cox in a nose tackle's body, because he can play in the B gaps and he can twist, he can stunt, he can post snap move. You can see it on the tape. He's not just a big old dude that you put in there to stuff the run. So
McMullen here with you on Birds 365. We have a esteemed guest joining us, even though he's not a member of the Follically Challenged Air Club. Looks like he's got his summer due already coiffed in nicely. Geoff Mosher joins us here on Birds 365. Looking good there, Mosh.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate it. And I'm not yet a member of the Follically Challenge, but I'm getting pretty close.
Come to get us all at some point. Just
in fact, it's good to hang out with you guys because it makes it look.
There you go. You got a full head of hair compared to McMullen and McDonald. That's for damn sure.
How you guys doing?
It's always my job. It's good to see you, Jeff.
You too.
Let's start with your early thoughts on the Eagles. Obviously, a couple splash moves in the draft on day one. I think a lot of value in day two. People really excited with Nakobe Dean as a value pick in the 3rd round with some, injury cost benefit analysis factored in. And then not much they could do in the day 3 because of all they used in draft capital to get 2 potential difference makers. Just your overall thoughts on the draft.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to look at, and because the draft is sort of this crapshoot, right? And you never exactly know until they start playing. But there's a lot to look at and say from a value standpoint, John. I mean, you can make an argument that they got 2 definitive first-round talents in Jordan Davis and A.J. Brown, and 1 top 40 talent in Nakobe Dean. So whenever you come out of draft weekend and you can say you got that, that's pretty good from a value standpoint. There's no doubt about it. There are some things that I think that you look at overall with some of the guys and you have some concerns about until they get on the field and play. With Jordan Davis, obviously it's his weight. With Nakobe Dean, obviously it's his medical history. And then, of course, the idea that they came out of the entire 3-day extravaganza without, once again, a safety or a corner is also a concern. And even the 2nd-round pick, Cam Jurgens, is a guy that may have to sit his entire first year, although they plan to cross-train him at guard. He's never played guard in his entire life. And I would say, even if he could play guard, do you really want a 300-pound center and a 300-pound guard when you used to have Brandon Brooks at guard as he's 330 and Landon Dickerson's 360. I mean, that was kind of the backbone of your offensive line was you were a mauling offensive line, and it would be hard to be that with 2 guys who just barely tipped the scales at 300. But that's all stuff for the Eagles to work out. They clearly are an improved team on paper.
All right, I'm going to go both optimistic and pessimistic in one fell swoop with a hypothetical question for you here, Moshe.
Mm-hmm.
Jordan Davis shows up in camp. He's 325 pounds. He's svelte. He's a wrecking ball and a killing machine, and nobody can stop him in the middle of that line. He's easily their best defensive tackle. How much does he play? Do
great
you
question.
Not use Fletcher Cox? Do you minimize Javon Hargrave? What happens if he comes in? He's everything they expected and a bag of chips. How does that defensive rotation work at DT?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think you sort of have to, if that were the case, you'd sort of have to talk to Fletch about the idea of a less is more and go back to his earlier or middle of the career days when he was really, not playing. He was not on the field 70% of the time, more like 55 to 60. That's what you see Vita Vea at. He plays about anywhere between 55-65% of the snaps, and the same thing with Haloti Nada. I went and looked at how much he used to play. So Jordan Davis, as good as you're saying he might be, is not going to play upwards of 60 to 70% of the snaps, and neither is Fletcher Cox. And no matter who starts out there on snap one, at the end of the game, it's going to look pretty similar as far as everybody's going to be rotated in and out. So I think you can look. Fletcher Cox had a chance after being released to sign anywhere. He came back to Philadelphia. He's making $14 million. There's got to be someone who can sit down and say, all right, if this team that comes out, let's say we play the Titans week 1, and they come out with Derrick Henry and then 2 tight ends, they want to run the ball. We're going to put Jordan Davis out there with either you or Hargrave, most likely Hargrave, right? And then you're going to come in as soon as it's 2nd and 9, right? As long as we stop the run, and you're going to get in there to rush the passer. I have a feeling Fletch at this stage of his career is going to be all right with that. I know last year he was a little upset with the structure of the defense, but we know that hasn't changed. The coordinator hasn't changed, and he re-signed back here, frankly, for a lot more money than probably anybody else was going to give him for 1 year. So I think he'll live with that.
Jeff, the conventional wisdom in this league is generally if you're going to be a high draft pick, you better be on the field on the most important down, 3rd down. You got to help win games. How many NFL games are decided late in the 4th quarter? I mean, 70%. If you're not going to impact the passing game either offensively or defensively, you shouldn't be that high of a draft pick as Jordan Davis. That's the conventional wisdom. Now, the Eagles will tell you, JG will tell you that they had a real difficult time stopping the run, and that turned, 3rd down into 3rd and 3 and 3rd and 2 instead of 3rd and 7 or 3rd and 8 or 3rd and 12 and people behind the sticks, and that makes it easy to complete 80% of the passes. So are the Eagles being sort of open-minded and saying, well, this guy's a different type of difference maker, or do you subscribe to that? It's got to be on the field on 3rd downs.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that there are some exceptions, and the Eagles have never been afraid to make some exceptions. For example, they drafted Andre Dillard when they had Jason Peters, and there was the idea that he may not get on the field until year 2, even though Peters had a bunch of injuries. So they've never been afraid to do that. Whether that's right or wrong, it's sort of case by case. But there are some teams that will take certain players in the 1st round for the promise of tomorrow more so than today. When you look at what Jonathan Gannon wants to do structurally, at least what we think he wants to do, is you go back to the first half of last year. He wanted to play his safeties deeper. He wants to play his linebackers a little bit back. And to do that, to play sort of like a Tampa 2 or a cover 2, you need to have a mammoth run stuffing defensive tackle. And it's not like the Eagles went out there and only got Tony Siragusa, right? Somebody who could only, or Gilbert Brown. I know I've seen that comparison. I don't think that's fair because Jordan Davis is a unicorn who he's actually, to me, a 3 technique like Fletcher Cox in a nose tackle's body, because he can play in the B gaps and he can twist, he can stunt, he can post snap move. You can see it on the tape. He's not just a big old dude that you put in there to stuff the run. So what I think the Eagles saw was the bigger picture here, John, and that the widespread impact he would have not only on the defensive line, but if you have Jordan Davis in the game and he's effective, then your offense is probably not going to try to run the ball up the middle. So that's going to take a load off of your linebackers who tend to be, smaller and undersized. They worked better when they were sideline to sideline, and having Jordan Davis helps you go sideline to sideline. And then if you're Jonathan Gannon and you feel more comfortable playing 2 safeties deep now again, like you tried to do last year, and you can stop the run with 2 safeties deep, well, now you've added an extra protection for your corner opposite Darius Slay, who last year was Steven Nelson, and they had to work around and scheme around last year. So by just having Jordan Davis on the field in certain down and distances, they're expecting a wider spread impact on the entire defense that's going to help the linebacker and the corner.
Well, let me get another healthy speculation out of you on Jonathan Gannon. They made their big free agent move day 1, gave Haason Reddick nice chunk of change, double-digit sacks each of the last 2 years. The Eagles had 0 double-digit sacks guy over the last 2 years. So the upgrade is obvious. But how they're going to use him isn't. He is kind of a tweener. He's a little undersized for defensive line. You get him in there, you're going to run the passer. The other team ends up running the ball. Might have an issue. He's not as good when he's playing linebacker. If you get caught in the wrong type coverage, might be asked to cover somebody out of the backfield. It's going to come down to pushing the right buttons. Do you have faith that Jonathan Gannon will do that with Haason Reddick? And how do you think it's going to play most times, him as a defensive end or a Sam linebacker?
Yeah, so I think he's both. I think he's two players wrapped in one. He's what Jannard Avery was last year on first and second down, which is the fifth guy on the line, a linebacker who comes up and plays right next to the right defensive end. So it gives you a 5-man defensive line, and that gives you an extra run defender or someone who diverts the run. And then if that's successful enough, they stop the run well, and it's second and long or third and long, someone comes off the field. That's what they have to figure out. Which lineman is now coming off the field because Haason Reddick is staying on the field, and they're going to be I assume, will be a more traditional 4-3 team with, say, Reddick and Sweat as your edge rushers, and then Cox and Hargrave, or Davis and Cox, or Davis and Hargrave, or Barnett, maybe Brandon Graham kicked inside. I mean, the beauty is they have a lot of guys. It does sort of remind you, I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but of the depth that the 2017 team had, right? I mean, there's no doubt that team was deep on the D-line, and they figured out roles for everybody, and it worked well. This team has that kind of depth. You can argue about the talent level of certain guys, certainly. That's fine. But they have a lot of bodies, and that's for them to figure out. But there's no, in my mind, Haason Reddick is on the field as much as he possibly can be, because he's going to rush the passer. Now, the question you brought up is, what happens if he's on the field in that 5-2 look as the Sam linebacker on line of scrimmage, and the opposing offensive coordinator says, well, we're just going to come out and play action pass on first down all the time and try to attack his area, because he will have to drop in that situation. Or if he's a rusher, somebody else is going to have to drop and cover the flats and the comebacks. Whether that's him, whether that's a linebacker, that they got to figure that out, and that'll be schematic along with personnel. But the idea is that Haason Reddick was, as you mentioned, has double-digit sacks, was paid a lot of money. He's going to be on the field, occupying both of those roles.
Jeff, you mentioned that term depth. When I think depth in the Philadelphia Eagles, I start on the other side of the football, and that's the offensive line. And, it was interesting. I started to mull yesterday. The Eagles might think about moving on from Isaac Seumalo, because Isaac's really expensive for a guard. He's played, I think the number is 12 games over the past 2 years. So he's had some injury problems. He's coming off a Lisfranc injury. Nick Sirianni loves Jack Driscoll. He's one of his favorite players. And Jack played well, even though he's had his own injury problems through his first 2 years. The one thing I didn't see coming is Herbie getting the axe so quickly. Eagles obviously tried to trade him. Weren't able to get anything done. Really did him kind of a solid by letting him get out there and try to find another job at this point. But any surprise at all that the Eagles moved on from Nate Herbig so quickly, or should they have kept him through training camp and maybe tried to create the Matt Pryor like trade? Yeah, you're only going to get a 6th or 7th pick, but it's something. Should they have waited it out?
I mean, they could have. I think that you're right in that you probably almost can definitely make sure you get yourself a deal at some point if he's not going to be on your team. But you can also look and say that I think the RFA tag for him was $2.5 million.
Yeah,
and that's a lot of money for a third string. It's a lot of money for a backup. He became a third string center when they drafted Cam Jurgens. You have to now put Cam Jurgens on your second string offensive line, give him those reps, and get him ready to be the center if Jason Kelce were to get hurt. So that moves Herbig to only guard. And as you mentioned, you have Jack Driscoll there. You have the kid from Indianapolis they signed last year, Raven Clark. Right. They've got Sua Opeta, who some people say can only
Tesla
play right
stock.
guard.
Yeah, they love Sua.
Yeah, and of course Isaac Seumalo, who's going to compete with Driscoll, you would imagine as of right now at right guard. So, and the loser of that Seumalo most likely will probably be a candidate, as you're mentioning, to get traded down the road. So, how many offensive linemen do you want to get stuck having to trade down the road at one time, including Andre Dillard? We'll see what happens with him. And now that he's 325 pounds, we were told on Inside the Birds that he might start taking a few reps at guard, maybe perhaps as a cross training thing anyway. But he, 325, you're talking about, okay, that you can see that a little bit at guard. So they had so much depth. I think they did the right thing. They have a good relationship with Kenny Sarnoff, the agent, and I think it made sense financially for them to do that. The question that you have is Isaac Seumalo. He actually, he has a team-friendly deal if he's a starter.
Yeah.
But you're right. He's an expensive backup. But they can't make a move yet, I don't think, until they see how Jack Driscoll is going to respond. He was on IR at the end of the year. It's my understanding. I don't know if they're 100% certain he'll be ready for OTA. So I think they want to see that first before they make any other kind of corresponding type moves.
I'd want to get another speculatory read out of you. Who's going to have more touches this year? Miles Sanders or the running back
Gainwell?
that they took? Miles on the last year of his deal. For me, he's still their most talented player, but Gainwell is younger, and they like what they saw out of him last year. I'm a Boston Scott guy, so he's going to get his little percentage of plays and touches and the like. But who's going to get more touches, assuming equal health? If they're both good for all 17 games or 15 games or 14 games apiece, it's not one guy's hurt, the other one's playing. Who gets more touches, Gainwell or Sanders?
Well, if they're smart, it's Miles Sanders. A, because he's still their most talented running back. And B, it's because if you don't plan on giving him a contract extension, then ride him as long as you can. I mean, you take the Pittsburgh Steelers Le'Veon Bell approach and say, all right, you're not going to sign this. You're getting about 500 touches this year, brother. Good luck next year. So, in fact, Le'Veon had to take a whole year off to recover from that. So I think that they should give Miles Sanders every opportunity. Give him the ball. He's their most explosive player. He can pretty much do anything that a running back needs to do. He just has to stay healthy. So that would be my guess, that he gets the most touches unless he gets hurt.
Yeah, I've asked this to quite a few people. I'll ask you as a Penn State guy, Jeff. Miles, I don't think any of us question Miles's talent, but we know what the Eagles think of this position as a whole, and they're not the only team. It's, the most devalued position in the NFL. So I look at the second contract. I can't find a path for him to be on the Eagles again next year, because if he plays, if they do run him into the ground, the Eagles are not, and even if he has a big year, the Eagles are not going to want to give him big money because they know what's coming on the other side of that.
Right.
And if he plays poorly, they're going to move on and just sort of keep the carousel going and go in a different direction. Is there any path for Miles Sanders to be here in 2023?
The only path I could see, John, is that if Miles Sanders is having a pretty good year, not like a crazy Christian McCaffrey 3 years ago type year, but having a pretty good year, and it looks like you're happy with what you got, you try to approach him for an extension around the middle of the year. Now, at that point, he'd probably be ludicrous to sign it, but he does have an injury history. So you kind of play on that, right? You say, look, you try to extend him to a team-friendly contract. And the Eagles have paid running backs. They did it late with Brian Westbrook. They did it with LaShawn McCoy. So when they identify a guy, they're not afraid to extend him for big money. It's just never going to be like top 3 at the time money. And so that's probably how they can approach it with Miles. Sometime around week 5, week 6, if he's having a good year, started every game, doing what you need him to do, then you approach him about a contract extension that sort of has that team-friendly, but gives him enough money where he feels pretty comfortable about it. And if he says no and wants to gamble on himself and make more on free agency, you say, all right, go for it, and I can see them doing that. But you're right. If he has an amazing year, 1,500 yards, 10 combined touchdowns, and he doesn't sign anything by the end of the year, I don't see that extension coming.
All right, Jeff, John and I end up talking more about this guy than we think we ever going to, and that would be Epsy, Marcus Epps, who Howie Roseman a couple times have suggested, I know you guys think of Epps, but we might think a little bit better of Epps than you do. As of right now, he's the Eagles' other starting safety, and they brought back Anthony Harris on a very team-friendly deal. So they have not put much time. Well, I think they put a lot of time in. They just haven't put any money into the safety position just yet. If Marcus Epps is their safety for 80% of the snaps this year, is that going to be good enough for the Birds to be a playoff team?
I think we're asking the wrong question, and maybe I'm on an island on this, but I think you should be asking that question about the other starting safety, not Marcus Epps.
Yeah,
Marcus Epps can run. They like
Yeah.
Marcus Epps. He can turn and flip his hips and run better than anybody they have at that position. Does that make him perfect? Absolutely not. Does that make him more of a fit for the way the game is played in this league than Anthony Harris? Absolutely. I mean, I think if you asked certain people in the building who would you rather have, they take Epps because he's younger and he can run. And Anthony Harris is basically, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, he's just an okay average safety back on a 1-year deal. I think in general, it's not a great safety outlook. I mean, Marcus Epps and Anthony Harris, and of course, Kevon Wallace, who has not endeared himself to them yet, is their number 3. At this point, there's nobody out there in free agency with Teron Matthew gone that I think that they're going to sign and say, you're our starter. So they may sign somebody for depth. Maybe they work out a trade, but I honestly think you got what you got.
Yeah, I'm with you, Jeff. I think Epsy is the Eagles' best safety right now. Number 1, safety 1 is Marcus Epps. Now,
if he's safety 1, that's safety problem for my money.
That's fair. And
Sure.
they tried to sign Marcus Williams, so they know they need a better player at the position. But yeah, it's strange to me, and I put it on Twitter. I think the fan base, they latch on to certain players, and sometimes they don't understand, and they dismiss certain players. Sometimes I don't understand. Marcus Epps is that guy right now. I think he's the most underrated player by the fan base the Eagles have for whatever reason. I don't necessarily understand it, but they have other problems in the secondary, Jeff, and that's corner.
Mm-hmm.
Big news out of New York. Giants have been trying to trade James Bradbury. Hasn't worked out. Man, that'd be a perfect corner for the Philadelphia Eagles. That is a good zone corner.
Maybe, yeah. Now, that's his style, right?
Yeah,
right.
Might be a little bit expensive even at this point. I think if they do release him, I think he'll have plenty of suitors. Could that be a fit here, though, James Bradbury?
It's one of those situations, and sometimes we say this about the Eagles, right? Why would they release him? Don't you think that they could be able to flip James Bradbury for at least a 6? Like, isn't there someone who wants – you see it with running backs, you understand that. You see it with certain positions, linebackers, sure, those guys get cut because that position is very fungible. Cornerback, not so much. So I'd be shocked. Well, no, I wouldn't be shocked. But if I'm the Giants, I'm doing everything I can I'll take a future 6th instead of just letting him go to the
all right.
level.
Let's say the Eagles have to give up a future 6th.
No, I wouldn't trade him to the Eagles if I were the Giants.
Yeah, it's in division. But we've seen more of that. You saw the kid from Cherry Hill, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, trade with the Detroit Lions and the Green Bay Packers in the same sticking first round. Well, the Packers trade was I guess 2 picks into the second round. There seems to be more willingness with the new era of GMs to talk to each other and make those types of deals. But yeah, that would be difficult for the Giants from an old school thinking perspective. Right. I would say Dave Gettleman wouldn't do it, but you never know with Joe Schoen. Now, the problem with Bradbury is he makes a ton of money right now. So if you're trading for him, you got to pick up the contract. That's the issue.
That's why they're not getting any offers for him.
No, that's probably why they're not.
His contract is too big.
Yeah. Well, that's going to be dangerous because then he could go to Dallas, he could go to Philadelphia, he could go to a lot of teams that like to play zone. Now, interestingly enough, the Eagles want to play zone, but they had to play a lot of man by the end of last year because of their their schematic issues and their personnel issues. But now that they've reshaped some things, they'll probably, I would think, go back to being a heavily zoned team. So Bradbury could definitely fit there. That's a name you absolutely have to keep your eye on if he gets released by the Giants.
All right, Moshe. Andy Weidel has been rumored to be the top candidate to be the Steelers general manager. Kevin Colbert ran the draft, is stepping aside. We expect an announcement in a week or two. They can take their time here because you want to get your guy in place once you start opening your camps and stuff like that, but it's not a major rush. If he is Pittsburgh choice, the Eagles took a couple of hits already this year, losing guys from that general manager factory that they've got in their front office. Weidel would be another one. He'd actually become the GM, unlike the two guys who already left for the assistant positions. Are the Eagles situated in a good enough spot to be able to replace these guys coming up for the next year?
That's a great question. Situated in the spot. I mean, you're right. They have to replace at least one of the two guys that they lost there. And if they do lose Andy Weidel, then they would have to find another guy. Now, Howie's pretty good at finding guys. You know, like when he brought in Dave Caldwell, brought in who's the former Chiefs GM who's escaping me right now?
John Dorsey.
Dorsey, right. He finds guys all the time. In fact, just knowing how Howie works, I know that, with Mike Mayock out there, it wouldn't shock you if you tried to reach out to Mayock.
Yeah, that's a big Jody. He's
that
recommended that.
Yeah, no, and I'm not reporting. I'm just speculating on how Howie kind of goes after these guys. I mean, he had Phil from the Browns. Phil
Savage.
Phil Savage at one point in the front office. So you could see Howie doing that. I think that they're going to be, for Howie at least, now that the draft is over, priority number one is figuring out the future of the front office with all the losses. I mean, he talked about it so much about how difficult it was and a little bit sour grapes in my opinion, but because the rule's been around forever and all of a sudden it hit the Eagles and he was upset about it, and then they got it changed. But I have to think that number one priority for him is to make sure the front office is replenished, restocked. So I would assume he is going to find some people, and people are always looking to, the Eagles do pay well. So I think that puts them in an advantage over some other clubs. So I don't doubt that they'll be able to fill their spots.
And Andrew Berry, obviously.
Andrew Berry, another one.
In between his stints with the Browns. He's at Geoff Mosher, NFL on Twitter, host of Inside the Birds with our buddy Adam Kaplan. Read him on InsideTheBirds.com. Get the podcast wherever you get your favorite podcast. Jeff, final one from me. Two players, Jalen Reagor, Andre Dillard. They got past the draft. I think there's still significant value with Andre Dillard with this team. Didn't pick up his fifth-year option yesterday. That was expected. He's in great shape. Anybody who saw him post his stuff on Instagram, he's going to be a starting left tackle in this league next year somewhere, not this upcoming season, 2023. Jalen Reagor, on the other hand, I don't know. There's not much value there. Howie went on record saying, no, he's a part of the Eagles, but it's interesting. They never talk about him. Yes, Nick Sirianni, even before A.J. Brown got here, he had started talking about Devontae and Quez and Zach Pascal before Jalen Reagor. Odds, week one, Andre Dillard's here, Jalen Reagor's here.
So, all right, let's start with Andre Dillard. He does serve a decent purpose now, right? Because, I mean, he's now worked himself into 325, and maybe he's got some positional versatility. He's still a backup, and so that makes you wonder, why is he on the team if there's going to be some demand for him as a backup? But we've seen the Eagles value backups on the offensive line. They don't have to trade him, in my opinion, because as you just mentioned, John, the likelihood of him signing a deal in free agency means that they've probably calculated what kind of deal they think he can get and how that would help them in the comp pick formula. And if they think they can get a fourth because of losing him, then they're not going to accept anything lower than a 4 for trading him. So you can see them hanging on to him in that regard, or maybe waiting for somebody to get an injury and really come desperately calling. They're going to obviously give him a lot of snaps in the preseason, showcase the new physique, and hope he plays well. And he played fairly well last year in the preseason. So you can see that happening. So I don't think there's an urgency with him to be moved. Jalen Reagor, a little different. And I know that, how he talks about he's an Eagle and that's, we still want to make something work and we want to have as many good players at that position. But it's clearly, as you mentioned, the coach doesn't see him high on the pecking order at all. The coach sees A.J. Brown. The coach sees Devontae Smith. The coach sees Quez Watkins. The coach got his teacher's pet in Zach Pascal. So that's already 4 guys right there that are probably higher on the totem pole. So you have a first-round pick as your 5th receiver. That's a backup receiver, special teams. He doesn't play special teams. So to me, it's bad financially, and it's bad from optics standpoint for the Eagles and Jalen Reagor to just sit there on the bench collecting dust while the team is playing. All right. So I think it would be wise of them to move on. I know how that's tough for Howie. The only thing and I know there'll be a market. There will be a market for Jalen Reagor. I know that. The question is, Howie has been stubborn in the past. You saw it with Zach Ertz. Had an opportunity to take a deal, didn't. Waited until the middle of the year and traded him and didn't really get what he wanted. It was a 5th-round pick in Tay Gowan. Yep. So is he going to be stubborn about Jalen Reagor because Jalen's a first-round pick in his? Could be. We'll see. But that one, to me, if there's going to be a deal, it's going to happen way before Andre Dillard, I would imagine.
And Dillard, I'll believe that he can play other positions when I see him play other positions. Hey,
I'm with you on that. I know. I think it's great that he broke up, but
that doesn't prove anything to me.
Right. I mean, this guy struggled. If you're going to say one thing he struggled with as in college and a pro, with bull rush. I mean, he was a finesse player. Oh, yeah. So now you're going to play him potentially a guard where all you see is bull rushes by bigger guys. That, to me, that doesn't make sense. But you can't, until we see him, his new mentality. He's got this physique, and he was tougher last year. He just wasn't good enough to unseat Mailata. We'll see how he is.
And by the way,
people surprise you.
Jordan Mailata's versatility plays into it as well, because if you have an issue with Lane, Jordan's comfortable playing right tackle. So you just move Jordan to right tackle like they did last year when Lane left the team with the mental health and the anxiety issues. They just kicked Jordan when he was healthy to right tackle and put Andre at left tackle. So this team is unique because they have Jordan Mailata, and he's still a really good, and I'm talking about Andre Dillard, really good backup left tackle.
Yes.
When does the next Inside the Birds pod drop, Mr. Mosher?
It'll drop Thursday morning at 6 a.m. And in between, we'll have a lot of content on InsideTheBirds.com. We'll have a show that we do with Greg Cosell that'll come out tomorrow, Wednesday morning, called The Intel with Greg Cosell. That's been a 3-month-long series that we do, and he's gonna break down all the guys that the Eagles drafted and signed as free agents, and we'll have a comprehensive look at all of them.
Very nice. Cosell's as good working the tape as anybody in the business.
That's right.
You are always good when you come on with us. We appreciate it greatly. Feel free to get that hair trimmed even more so you can get more in tune with the other 2 M's you join here on Birds 365. Thanks, brother.
If I go bald, do I just become a third member and it's the 3 M's?
Oh, yeah.
Mosher, McMullen,
you're always welcome.
Okay. All right. We'll do it.
We'll work on that for damn sure.
My
Jeff,
people
thanks,
call
bud.
your
Appreciate
people.
it. That's Geoff Mosher from Inside the Birds here with us on Birds 365. A lot of Birds talk. We'll come back, do a little bit more, put a bow on the show. Stick around.